Anyway, I've only heard my dad swear only once, and it was when I was about 7, maybe 8 years of age. We'd gone into a neighbor's farm for some hay. We didn't have a farm in those days of our own where we grew anything. We had the homestead, but it was still mostly in sagebrush. And we got a load of hay on a pickup. There was just Dad and me. We left the haystack, and as we pulled away from it and into the field through snow, it was about 2 or 3 inches of snow, we got the pickup stuck in a small ditch. The back wheels were in the ditch, and we just couldn't get it out of there. We backed forward and tried to get that thing out of that ditch, and finally we went out. We didn't have a shovel. We only had the pitchforks with us, and Dad took a pitchfork by that ditch by the tire to pull the dirt away from it, and ran a tine right into that tire, which means that the tire went flat in a hurry. And he hit the side of that truck and says, "Damn it, damn it, damn it." That's the only time I ever heard him swear. And boy, it was justified. Yeah, it was really justified. Well, Dad and Mother were very industrious. They did everything they could during those Depression years to keep us going as a family. There were the 7 children. And like I say, we always had food. We always had wonderful, I thought, things. Burley is the metropolis around Malta. It's 35 miles away, and I don't remember just when and how old I was when I first got to Burley, just 35 miles from Malta, but I was probably approaching 12 or somewhere in that age, where we really started going to Burley on weekends and to shop and what have you. But I remember that Dad used to love to go to the Western picture shows. So every time we went to Burley, we'd go to the Orpheum Theater there in Burley and go to a Western. And of course they had the serials running in those days, like the Flash Gordon or the Zorro or Dick Tracy serials. And we'd try to get into Burley every weekend to see the movie and see this serial. So we keep abreast with that story, and then of course we'd get a little candy. I want to go back for just a bit. One of the traditions that was very important in my growing up in our family was the fact that we always, as long as I can remember, had family home evening. A lot of people in the church think that President McKay started the family home evening in the 1960s, and that is when they set aside Monday for it. But actually, Joseph F. Smith, the president, started the family home evening program way back in about 1916. And he said that if families would hold family home evenings, that we'd not lose our children. Well, Mom and Dad made that a custom in our family, and there was no set night, so we used Thursday nights for our family home evening. And like I said, I'm thinking back in the 30s when we had no money. I don't know, I think there were years there that Dad never had more than $500 or $600 a year income total. And yet on Thursday nights, somehow he'd manage to bring home some candy bars from the store or something, and we'd cut them up in pieces, so we'd all got a piece of candy. But years later, when I was on my first mission, and I find that I'd be asked questions, or stories would come up, I found out that I knew the scriptures. I hadn't read them myself, but I'd had them read to me night after, well, on that family home evening night, through the years. Dad always read from the Old Testament and the New Testament, Book of Mormon to us, till I had them, and I knew stories that I didn't know I knew. I knew where they were too. And I credit it back to those family home evening lessons that we had through those years. Another thing about it is that Dad, being from Yorkshire, England, he loved the stories of Robin Hood. And so we got that in family home evening. He had the whole book, you know, of Adventures of Robin Hood, and he'd read that to us, and we'd read a chapter a week at family home evening. When we'd get through, he'd say, "Well, now what do you want to read?" And we'd vote it over, and we'd read Adventures of Robin Hood all over again. I don't know how many times I heard that story read to me as a child, but it seemed like it was over and over and over again, and we loved it. So the Adventures of Robin Hood in Yorkshire, England are part of our growing up. Another thing about those family home evenings in the 30s is that Grandpa and Grandma John Ernest Thompson only lived a mile from us, and so they were always part of that family home evening tradition. They were there in our home, and with the J. Henry Thompson family. And a lot of the time, Uncle Ted, my dad's brother, was there, and so he would be there in that family home evening. Now, Uncle Ted is still alive. He and Uncle Bill are the last remaining of Dad's family. Uncle Ted was born in 1904, so he's 84 years old now. He's living in a rest home up in Portland, Oregon. Uncle Bill was the youngest of that family, but he's got to be somewhere in his middle 70s or late 70s. I don't know just when his birthday was. And he lives in Prineville, Oregon. But anyway, those family home evenings I credit as a very special thing in our growing up and in my life. I'm sure other members of the family might say the same thing. So the 30s were great years. I've a few other memories about Malda. Of course, those years there weren't many cars around, and so a lot of people rode horses, and we had hitching posts up and down the main street of Malda, which is not, can't misrepresent. Malda is a very small town. I think there were, in the 30s, there were probably a couple of stores and a post office, and then a few homes and a church. Anyway, there were always these hitching posts there in the middle of the street, and the people come in on their buckboards and their wagons. And another thing that was pretty special in my growing up years is that every fall there'd always be a large entourage of Indians coming out of Fort Hall, coming into Almo and up in the mountains above Malta there to hunt for pine nuts and get pine nuts. And I remember those Indians and their wagons and their teams coming into Malta. Maybe there might be 5 or 6 wagons in a bunch, and then another group would come through, and there'd just be, for weeks, there'd be bunches of Indians coming through Malta in those buckboards, or I should say wagons. They didn't have buckboards coming. They bring their deerskin gloves to sell, and that was really a treat to get a pair of deerskin gloves for the winter. Of course, they'd come through in about this time of year, October, when the frost had hit, when the pine nuts were good. So those memories of those Indians going through Malta are pretty special in my growing up years. They say this is a genealogy tape. I don't know how much genealogy I put on it, but Jay did say he wanted me. Good job. Jay did say he wanted me to tell a story that everybody in the family's told so far, I understand. Raft River Valley, where Malta is located, is a very dry valley. I think they only get around 9 to 10 inches of rainfall a year. And some years, like this summer that's just passed, 1988, I'm sure they didn't get a drop, because we didn't get any up here, even here at Rexburg. And we generally get around 20 inches of rainfall here at Rexburg a year. But anyway, they say Raft River is the only river in the United States where the fish swim backwards in order to keep the dust out of their eyes. Anyway, that's about the truth. Back when we were young, though, the Raft River flowed quite well. There's big springs there in Malta, in the Hit Ranch. There's some big springs and elsewhere along the river. So there's always good river in the water in the Raft River, and a lot of good fishing in the Raft River. I remember making a fishing pole out of a willow and getting a pin on the end of it and going down and trying to catch a fish. I only caught one that way. We had a lot better luck catching fish when they came out through the irrigation ditch. In the 1930s, the church bought a large ranch, old cattle ranch, the Keel Ranch, around 7,000-acre ranch. It was all along the Raft River bottoms. And the Raft River is a small, really a creek, but every spring, because of the large mountains back behind Malta there, several mountains up around the 10,000-foot range, and get a lot of snow, and when that runoff hit, the river would always flood every year. And the old pioneers would talk about how the river would be a mile or 2 miles across it when it was flooded out in the springtime. Once that water went down, the grass would come up, and it'd just be beautiful for cattle and so on. Well, the old Raft River, the old Keel Ranch was right along that Raft River, 7 miles south of Malta.